Hello, everybody. This is Pastor David coming to you here from Mount Pleasant, beautiful Mount Pleasant. I'm glad you stopped in the middle of your week. It's great to be able to visit with you. I hope everything is good where you are. Boy, God is on the move here. We were just talking about Monday night. We had 151 people here for our Ignite strategic planning time for our church, leadership training, and just a lot of good things going on. We're excited about our future. We're excited about what God has done in our past, what God's doing now, and what God has planned for us in the future. We don't all know all the things God has ahead for us, but we do know that God's in control. And we're going to follow His lead. So thanks for joining us today. I hope you are able to be with us on Sundays. If you're not here personally, you can catch us online. I'm sure you do that. And I just want you to feel like part of the family. So some really neat things coming up soon this weekend. There's a couple of things coming up Saturday that I want you to know about. Our women's breakfast is this Saturday, April 2nd, 9 o'clock, every month. First Saturday of each month, ladies' breakfast. Want to invite you to that. Also Saturday, we have a barbecue fundraiser here on our campus for our youth group for their summer camp this summer and missions trip. And so I want to invite you to that. 11 o'clock until we sell out of barbecue. Boy, we did quickly last year. So I come by and get your barbecue before we run out. And then this coming Sunday, we have an important day. We're going to vote on allowing our growth team to pursue the purchase of the old middle school campus right here in town. I want to always make sure I get my wording right. That doesn't mean we're going to. That allows our growth team to pursue that property, do our due diligence, check it out, look ups and downs, ins and outs, and just present that information to the church. So we're excited. And then April 30, the last Saturday of April, we have our Happy Birthday CCMP. We are 7 years old. 7th birthday party, and it's going to be a great time. We can't wait, and just a lot of good things going on. So thanks for joining me today. I want to follow up. If you got to join us for the last few weeks here, we had a 5-part series from the book of Judges, and we studied all the judges and their personalities, their temperaments, their ups and downs, things they went through, learned a lot of things, and heard some crazy stories. But our last judge was Samson. We studied Samson for 2 weeks, and this past Sunday we saw how it all ended for Samson. He was the strongest man ever, as far as we can understand, the strongest man in the world, and everyone feared him because he slayed many men and did great, amazing feats with his physical abilities, and he was just an amazing figure. But his end was it was sad, because here's this giant of a man, and they put his eyes out, and he was grinding wheat walking around a circle with a stone, doing the work of an animal or a slave or a group of slaves, and he ended up being led to this celebration by the Philistines, Philistine royalty, and he asked the boy to lead him to the pillars, and he placed his hands upon the pillars of this giant conference hall, and probably 3,000 or more Philistines. And he said, Lord, he cried out to God, said, God, one more time, could you just give me the strength to do this one more time, to avenge mine enemies, the Philistines. And that day God heard his prayer, as God will hear you when you cry out to God. And God gave him his strength back, which he had lost. And he died with his enemies. He died with the Philistines, and he ended up accomplishing God's purpose for his life. Not the way that any of us thought it would end. My verse for you today is Proverbs chapter 14, verse 12. And I think about Samson as I read this verse. Proverbs 14:12. There is a way which seemeth right to a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. And I watched this story about Samson, and I wonder, how might his story have ended differently? He could have been the greatest warrior, the greatest mighty man of all time. But his life did not end that way. It ended in disgrace. And this verse says, there is a way which seems right to a man. So here's what I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about man's way and God's way. And it seemed that Samson always chose man's way. And he was a little bit careless with his lifestyle and his decisions, and he was given 3 mandates as a child being raised as a Nazirite. One was to not take any grapes or anything that relates to the grape wine, and the second one was to not touch any dead thing, carcasses or dead animals or dead things, and then the third one was to never cut his hair, because that symbolized strength for the Nazirite. And he disobeyed the first 2, and ultimately he was deceived into getting his hair cut off, which obviously all 3 of those vows he broke. And he met his death in a way of dishonor. Tragic story. He had so much strength, so much promise, so much potential. He had position. He had the right job. He had everything. Everybody feared him, and yet he ended his life because he chose man's ways with many of his decisions as opposed to God's ways. And as we end the story of Samson, a couple things we learned. You know what? God still accomplished his purpose. God still used Samson to do what he purposed Samson to do, and that was to destroy the Philistines, the enemies of God's people, and set God's people free. In spite of bad decisions, in spite of careless living and an undisciplined life, God still used him. Samson cried out to God, and God did what he always did, and God heard him. You see, God will not give up on you. God won't give up on me. Sometimes we think, well, I've messed up. I've had people, Pastor, I have messed up so bad. God couldn't. No, God doesn't give up. We might give up on ourselves, but God doesn't give up on us. And so the story of Samson, how might have it ended differently? And so my question is for you and for me, when we have to choose between man's ways and God's ways, because the way which seems right to a man, the end leads to the ways of death. And so let's choose life today. Let's choose God's way. We have God's laws, God's guidelines, and we have that. And so let's choose wisely. Let's live a life of discipline and respect, and not be careless with our choices. God bless you for joining us. We love you, and I'd love for you to come see us here at church, at the Community Church of Mount Pleasant. Love for you to watch us. I'd love to meet you. We're praying for you. Thank you for visiting with us today.